and happy Valentine's Day to you, or just after Valentine's Day. It's now February 15th, and I'm on an expedition to get all 50 states into the Payroll and Excel 2020 program. Been talking about it for a few months, so I figured it's really time to get going on this. A few of you have asked me for it, and I keep saying I'm going to do it, so here we go. We're starting alphabetically. I have a bunch of states in here already, but we got to start back at the beginning of the top of the list. And when you get to the top of the list, well, Alaska does not have any state tax, so that one's easy. Alabama. Well, I remember I've in the past I have attempted to do all the states for one year, and then I remember getting to Alabama every year and realizing that it's so needlessly monotonous and complicated that I was like, are all the states going to be like this? Well, fortunately, not all the states are as annoying as Alabama is to do, but we're going to talk about how to do Alabama state tax withholding rates in this video and show how the payroll file works. And we're going to keep going through the rest of the states. Hopefully before the end of the month, we've got an extra day here in February 29th. Let's see if I can get all of them done before then and really have that version for all the people that want a 50 state ready to go version. So let's talk about Alabama. Well, Alabama has an A4 form that your employee needs to fill out. It's going to have a few questions that are relevant. Those questions are, does the person want to withhold at the highest rate or essentially not use their personal exemption? They can write 0 here, or they really should put 1. If they are going to use their personal exemption, I'll show you where that goes in the file here. This is the employee info master sheet here where it's got the employee info. The how many federal withholdings do they have? Did they fill out a 2020 W-4 or not? Yes or no? Are they married? Yes or no? Alabama personal exemption. That was that question we just looked at. Are they a 0 or are they a 1? Are they going to use their own personal exemption? And also, what is their filing status? Are they M, MS, S, or H, which is single, married, married, filing separately, or head of household? That's the other relevant question, in addition to how many dependents do they have? That's the other question they want to know. So what's their filing status? Single, married, filing separately, married, or a head of household, and how many dependents do they have? Once you fill that in here, this is where you fill that in on the employee info master sheet, you can start to look at how the withholding rates are actually calculated. So it's pretty complicated. And what I mean by complicated is in this file where I'm working on the tax withholding rates for all the states, usually I have to set aside some columns for programming each state. Well, I had to set aside what looks like 11 columns to program just Alabama, which is insanity. And the reason why it's a little more complicated than normal is because they have different rates based on these 4 different filing statuses that they have. So what you're supposed to do with your Alabama wages, once you've answered those questions about what their filing status is, how many dependent allowances they have, and whether or not they're going to claim their own personal allowance or not. When you do that, you then have to go through this formula, and this is, let's try to do it in a couple minutes. How do you get there? How do you calculate it? Well, you have federal taxable income. It's like kind of like your gross wages without anything that was non-taxable, like a retirement plan or health insurance or something that might be pre-tax. Whatever the gross wages were that were remaining here, that's for the pay period. We're looking at a weekly pay period file right now. You have to annualize that. So they want to take the paycheck, multiply it by the number of pay periods in the year to get an annualized total. That's what this number is here for these 5 different employees, Pokemon character employees that I have created here. So once you annualize the wages, then it's going to figure out, well, what's the standard deduction that applies to you? And that's going to have to do with what your filing status was. And there's these formulas that I have in these cells here that look at a different range of potential annualized incomes that you could have. And if they're below 20,000 or below 30,000, it could be a different amount of a standard deduction. It's a formula that is involved in this area of the instructions of the Alabama withholding guide. So it's talking about what your filing status is and what your annualized income is. And it's going to give you a standard deduction amount or a way to formulate your standard deduction amount based on all those conditions. That's what these 4 columns are, different filing statuses. So these are kind of annoying, unique formulas that you would have to do if you were a payroll provider and needed to calculate tax. Well, after you do those 4, then there's more to do. They want to know what your annualized federal withholding was already. Luckily, we have that in the file right over here as the current federal tax withheld for the pay period already. They want to know what that is. They want to annualize that. So they want to multiply this number times the number of pay periods in the year. Then they want to know whether or not you're taking your personal exemption. And if you are taking your personal exemption, what your filing status was, because it's either going to be 3,000 or 1,500, depending on what your filing status is. Then they want to know the number of dependents that you have, and they want to multiply that by a formula depending on what your adjusted, what your taxable income, annualized taxable income is already. So they want to do all these things. They want to figure out then what is your taxable base by taking your annualized taxable income right here and subtracting out the standard deduction, the annualized federal amount, the personal exemption, whether or not you took it, and your dependent exemptions. All these 4 things come out of this to give you an actual taxable amount of Alabama gross income to be taxed. And then you multiply that by a formula if you're married, or a different formula if you're not under the married filing status. So there are a lot of ifs and thens and ways that the money gets moved around before you figure out what your actual tax amount is. Anyway, so that is pretty confusing because there's so many filing statuses and standard deductions and different tables essentially that you're applying to the income to get it there. So it's pretty annoying, and I'm glad that Alabama is done, and we'll be moving on to other states. What a paycheck looks like from Alabama is this. Alabama goes up to about 5% tax rate, I believe, on over like 6,000 of income if you're married, and 5,000 or 3,000 of income if you're single or married filing separately, I believe. So tax rate's relatively high, higher than you would think for Alabama. So that is how you do Alabama. We have other states already in here, already done. Like I said, Alaska has no state tax. Arizona, we already had in here. I actually have the Arizona area hidden because you get to choose your own rate if you're in Arizona. Type it right there. You get to choose your rate. So we have Arizona done. So the next video that is going to be coming out will be California. We will do California, and we will get through all these 50 states, I swear it. If you're interested in purchasing a copy of this file, it can be customized for any small business, and we will get all 50 states in here eventually. So we're out for now. Just go to kenriverman.com or contact me, and I will get you one copy of these files. So we're out.